In July 1861, only a few months after Fort Sumter, Union forces under McDowell marched south into northern Virginia for the first encounter of the war, very close to Washington. It happens around the town of Manassas. The battle is alternatively called Bull Run because that was a creek on the battlefield.
Lincoln's expectation going into the first battle of Bull Run is that the war will be settled in this one battle. The South will win its independence or the North will put down the rebellion. Both armies are green, not a lot of experience. When Abraham Lincoln calls for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion, they are limited to a 3-month enlistment. The Militia Act of 1795, by which he calls them forward, says it's only 3 months.
That's the way we've always done it. You know, the crisis comes along and we call in all the farmers to get your musket over the fireplace. And when the war's over, we send them home to be farmers again.
Lincoln recognizes that his men are not well trained, but politically, it would have been an abject sin to send all those soldiers back home if they hadn't been used in the first place.
The reality is the overwhelming sentiment on both sides was, let's get an army out there and get it done. And so Lincoln and other leaders were pressuring the Union Army under Irwin McDowell to get up there and let's fight.
Even though it seems so foreign to us, there was a great deal of excitement. There was a great deal of war enthusiasm. Keep in mind the technology of the time. We had no way to see a battlefield. People had seen paintings and sketches, and the notion was that these men are in formations and firing at each other, but it must be relatively safe.
There are people who literally showing up there with picnic baskets on their wagons to look at the Army's fight down on the hill.
Congressmen and senators and the social elite of Washington had come out to view the battle. This was a major spectacle. This is major entertainment.
And people really thought this would be their only chance to see one battle. The Union Army crossed the creek. They wage an attack against this very formidable force of Confederates.
Even during these difficult times, these trying times of war, we must remain strong and keep our faith in Him.
Sir, news from the field.
Lincoln is waiting to hear how it's going. And it starts as a Union advantage early in the morning. After church, Lincoln spends the rest of the day in the telegraph office. This will be his source of information.
The arrival of the telegraph, what Lincoln used to call lightning messages, changed the nature of information. Suddenly, what was known in one place could be known in other places, almost instantaneously.
Before you'd get a dispatch that would come in every few weeks or something, and so you really had to give almost complete autonomy to military leaders in the field. Now he's connected by a wire.
The day began very well for the Union. They routed Confederate forces and pushed them back. And not until the late afternoon did the Confederate forces counterattack.
General McDowell has a pretty good plan. The problem was he had a very green army. And so on the battlefield, they had a difficult time maneuvering. The South had many of the same problems, but then the South was fortunate because during the battle, the railroad allowed the South to move reinforcements up, which reached the battlefield at a critical moment.
Federal troops hear the terrifying rebel yell, this high-pitched yelping. Union troops described it as otherworldly. It had enormous results, let's put it that way.
The Confederates start pushing back, and the Federals cross back across the creek in a mad dash. They have been completely routed.
Citizens of Washington who had gone down in their carriages and set up picnic baskets on the bluffs overlooking the battlefield, they were having a high old time for lunch. And then when the battle turned, their picnic baskets were upended. They fled in disarray. And the Union troops had to march back in this searing July heat, humiliated.
For Lincoln now, the defeat is not something that happens hundreds of miles away that you read about. You see wounded soldiers, defeated soldiers, soldiers who've thrown away their arms, come streaming right back into the Capitol. So the idea of a disaster became tangible. You could see it, you could smell it.
What does McDowell say? That the day is lost.
It was probably his first military error. And on that day, Lincoln realized that this was not going to be a brief war. It was going to be a long war.